Let's kick it off. Welcome to Hacking Growth this holiday season, Netcore's Retail E-Commerce Masterclass. As I mentioned a moment ago, this is episode 3 of our holiday masterclass. If you missed episodes 1 or 2, they are available on demand right now. Episode 1 about finding your best customers, episode 2 around activating them across channels. Some really good stuff from Kath Pei and Karen Talavera. But I am especially excited about this week's masterclass, maximizing conversions with inbox commerce, strategies to convert directly in channel. It's something I am extremely passionate about, as is our guest this week, as is Netcore and Netcore Unboxed. And we thank again Netcore and Netcore Unboxed for sponsoring the masterclass. Netcore happens to send more inbox commerce enabled messages than anyone else on the planet. Over 2 billion messages sent so far that enable inbox commerce. We're going to dig into what that means today. But again, delighted to have our guest this week, my good friend and colleague, Matthew Vernhout, Vice President of Deliverability, Netcore. Matthew, thanks for joining us. Maybe a little intro. No, you don't need an intro.
So my name is Matthew Vernhout, as Nick mentioned. I'm the Vice President of Deliverability, overseeing Europe, North, and South America here with Netcore. I'm also the voice behind Email Karma. If you're out there reading internet blogs on email marketing, you maybe stumbled across it, as well as the founder of the Canadian Email Summit. Heavily involved in the industry in various groups, from the Messaging Anti-Abuse Working Group through the Coalition Against Unsolicited Commercial Email, Email Experience Council, and several others that you may stumble across as well when you're researching how to do email and email trends and technologies. So happy to be here to discuss inbox commerce and all those fun things that go along with it today.
Love it. Thanks for joining us, Matt. Delighted to have you here. And with that, let's get right into the meat of it. Inbox commerce, powered by AMP for email, accelerated mobile pages. Inbox commerce lets us bring full web and app functionality into the inbox itself, right? Live connectivity, full API calls, dynamic personalization upon open. It's really a new window into the inbox, which is, from my perspective, transforming the space. A little deeper maybe on just AMP for email specifically. It is a new message format, not that new now, right, Matt? It's been around, I think 2019 maybe is when it first came out.
It's certainly been a couple of years. The basis for AMP allows for highly interactive messages to be built in email. It really is sort of a new format in the sense of, we haven't introduced a new format in email probably in 20 years beyond HTML and text. So now we have AMP, which allows us to do a whole bunch of things that you saw sort of in the last image, where you could have a calendar, you could search, you could do appointment booking, and a whole bunch of really cool things direct from the inbox, reducing friction, reducing the need for consumers to click out and into a different application, which has been fantastic. And it does take there is a learning curve, and there is some limitations currently, but those limitations are growing every day in regards to what people are doing with AMP and the things that you can really sort of learn and engage your customers in a whole new way. And from a deliverability point of view, and that's where I sit a lot of times, more engagement equals better delivery. So anytime that you can work with your customers to increase adoption and engagement and interactivity with your email, absolutely worth it.
Yep. And it's interesting. We always get a lot of questions about deliverability specifically. And it can be transformative when it comes to driving incremental engagement. We're going to get into some of the stats. Another bullet here just about security, and a question just popped in too, and maybe we'll take it in line. In terms of security, I mean, people are submitting some PII in forms and things. How is it secure? For email, how secure is it?
Yeah, so it's certainly as secure as everything else on the internet.
Right.
In regards to, in order to enable it, you have to basically prove to the various mailbox providers that you know what you're doing. So it requires things like HTTPS for submission, potentially OAuth, depending where that data is being sent. If it's being sent back to your CDP, your ESP, maybe it's going to a Google web form. Which is then connected through OAuth. Are we at a place yet where we're taking sensitive PII like payment and things like that? We're not quite there yet. And I think that is being cautious on behalf of the industry. There's still a lot of phishing, there's still a lot of spam, there's still a lot of fraud that happens. But what AMP is doing is it's encouraging the adoption of authentication around SPF, DKIM, and DMARC. DMARC ad enforcement specifically. So messages making it to the consumer have gone through those tests to say, is this likely the message that the brand sent to this consumer? The mailbox providers then also tie into that reputation of the sender. So does the sender have a good reputation? If they do, they're going to display AMP. If the sender has a questionable or poor reputation, regardless of all the things being set up properly, they're not likely to show the AMP script. So there are several touch points. So as from a security point of view, yeah, absolutely, everything has to be HTTPS, encrypted transit, and then where you're storing it falls into your own security or your vendor's security programs.
Yep, love it, makes sense. And in this last point, and we're going to go much deeper here in a moment, but it hasn't been easy. It isn't easy. It's a new MIME type. You got to do incremental Q&A. It's an incremental process. It's different. I think it's gotten much easier though over time. And in the old days, we as vendors supported it with just another window to cut and paste the MIME type in. And now we do have a lot of tools, and we can talk about that in a bit too. Tools, templates, best practices to get inbox commerce and for me email off the ground. But maybe a little bit on.
So AMP is also a growing technology in the world of the mailbox providers. So there are currently a handful of mailbox providers supporting AMP. From a good point, the average B2C email marketer, Google, Gmail domains typically make up greater than 50% of your list. So a very large portion of your audience by default will have access to AMP messaging. Then you tie in Yahoo and AOL and all of their affiliated brands that use their same web interface. You're looking at another, call it 10 to 15% of the average list. So all of a sudden you're now anywhere from say 60 to 80% of an email list for B2C with the ability to support AMP. Looking back, sort of the big holdout, still being Microsoft from the consumer point of view. But overall, there is a significantly large footprint for AMP in the average B2C marketers list. As well as, we've seen adoption coming from the marketing service provider platforms. For a long time, there was only a handful, and it really was sort of that, chicken and egg theory of nobody's supporting it because nobody's doing it. Now we have a whole bunch of people that are capable of doing it, and we'll start to see, at least in my opinion, we'll start to see the adoption of more mailbox providers supporting it and email clients supporting it.
Yep, totally with you. You mentioned Microsoft being a headwind. The other headwind, obviously, is Apple. That we don't see that name on the list either. But worthy of noting that anyone who has an iOS device with the native Google client or the native Yahoo client is going to be addressable on.
And all Android users are using the Gmail client.
And all Android users.
So yeah, that will all be capable as well.
Yeah, and in this country, and there is variance too, right? Like in Europe, Asia, where Android does have a dominant market share. Yeah, the addressability factor goes way up too. Love it. So maybe, Matt, tell us a little bit more about just what it takes to get it done. And you hit a little bit on the authentication stuff, but worthy of maybe hitting on again, because it's critical.
Yeah, so we touched on this with the security question from a couple slides ago. In order to do most modern email things, so not just AMP, but even looking at schema, looking at BIMI, there's a requirement to authenticate your email and authenticate it properly, right? There are a number of different things that cause SPF to fail. Typically, the one that we see the most is what we call record stuffing, where you have too many records included one SPF lookup. So you go over the 10 record lookup, potentially misaligned DKIM keys. So that might be where you're not signing with your own key, you're signing with just a vendor key. Or you're using a vendor email address as your envelope address, and there's alignment issues within the DKIM structure. Both of these will be prevalent in DMARC reporting. DMARC, we could do a whole masterclass just on authentication, but DMARC is a way for brands and email senders to request that the recipient mail server, at the point of authentication failure, take a specific action. So if both SPF and DKIM fail, DMARC would say, please take the following action. Do nothing, quarantine the mail or put it in the spam folder, or simply reject the message. And those are required for AMP because the mailbox providers want to have a solid understanding that the mail is actually being sent from the brand. The next piece is you have to be able to actually send fully compliant AMP email. And that requires, like we talked about just a few moments ago, even templating, content, connections to databases or backends, maybe connections to your inventory system. You basically have to be able to prove that you can code the messages to behave properly. And we got a bunch of examples of different AMP type emails and sort of how they connect and then the types of functions that they can do. You also, as part of that compliant message, you have to be able to send a fallback. Not every individual is going to see an AMP message. Maybe they're using Thunderbird or they're using Apple Mail, which doesn't support AMP. So you do need to send a fallback type of content. That would be your traditional text and HTML parts. And it should be one or the other. In theory, it could also be both. So you're sending 3 content pieces, and then the mailbox provider or email client is determining which of those content pieces to show. You have to obviously send it from a provider that supports AMP. And as you can see, that list has been growing steadily. And then in order to get approved, so there is an approval process as well, you do have to send sample emails to to all of the existing AMP providers. So Google, Yahoo, if you have a large base of mail.ru users, they're going to want to see that you can send AMP content, and they will go through an approval process. We have some more slides on that later, so I won't get too deep on that now. And then, like all things in email, we like to say test, learn, test, learn, test, learn, profit, right? And we're going to talk about some of those use cases and some of the success we've seen with brands implementing AMP and how it's been really improving their email engagement with their consumers and their impact to their own bottom line.
Yep. Big impact and across several different areas, average order value and a bunch of different use cases around just cross-selling, personalizing, recommendations implemented in the inbox itself, frequency of purchase, again, more relevant messages, gamified messages with a two-way interaction, flash sales, limited time deals, feedback forms. One of my favorite is just increased engagement through zero-party data collection and incremental data collection, which can happen so much easier in the inbox itself. ratings and reviews, another huge one. Great use case to happen in the
And
inbox.
I even love the idea of like some things like live inventory count, and you know, if there's a very popular item, it could be, you know, currently out of stock, and then someone reloads the email tomorrow and it's in stock, right? You don't necessarily even have to send a second email to say in stock, because the content for 30 days after it arrives will be updated. That's the one other piece, right? AMP has a 30-day longevity, so any message in the inbox from an AMP campaign will be AMP enabled for 30 days. After that, it reverts back to the HTML standard content piece that you would see, and that's a security function as well. So going back to the security question, not leaving AMP open forever in someone's message, and that can be controlled by the sending side. So if you have a policy internally that you want to turn off an AMP campaign for 10 days, you can, from the back end, turn it off, or you can wait the 30 days, and both the mailbox provider and the back end could be set to turn that off.
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge. And just to tack onto that, that message is really only for you too, or only for that individual sender, because that individual or recipient, because that recipient can't forward the message then onto
Right.
other.
That's a good point too, right? As another piece is security. If someone forwards the message, the recipient of that forward gets the fallback content. So you know, it is a single use case. You don't have to worry about it being forwarded. You don't have to worry about somebody else getting access to somebody's account due to AMP messaging or AMP content that way. And then it drives back to that fallback piece.
Yep. Yeah, lot of control for the marketer there, and yeah, and guardrails there, and ultimately, you know, as we're going to see, the ability to drive incremental conversions, and it's a tool for e-commerce and D2C marketers to really drive people down the funnel and drive that incremental conversion through add to wish list, through cart recovery, abandoned carts, a big use case we see, which it can be done, as well as welcoming people into the program with more engaging messaging right up front to drive incremental engagement from the get-go.
That's a great example. I think, you know, if you're stuck and say like, where do I start with AMP? You could very well just send a welcome message that says, click here to confirm you want to receive email from us, or click here to update your preferences and tell us what you want to hear about, and drive all of those things directly in the email with a very simple first step engagement, first step iteration of your program, and then get into the more complex things like shopping carts and carousels and you know, live content updating, etc.
100%, 100%. And we do have a pretty well-developed maturity curve around AMP implementations that were inbox commerce implementations. We'll get them to that in a few minutes, but just to hit on the real, just cutting to the chase here. Traditional email funnel on the left looks pretty, you know, familiar to most of us, standard stuff. This is what we're doing with inbox commerce on the right. Right. Just
so every time you ask someone to click, every time you ask someone to go to a new page, every time you ask somebody to take an additional step, there is naturally drop off. There is somebody that's not going to complete that next step for whatever reason. So looking into, you know, how do we reduce the number of steps? How do we reduce the number of clicks required? Right. So someone could be in an email and say, I like this sweater, but I want it in gray versus in green. You could actually flip through the colors in the email and then click add to cart. So it's already in the cart when they then visit the webpage to check out. So you've reduced the number of clicks, you've reduced the amount of time that they need to spend on your website potentially when making those commerce decisions. You know, and really moving forward down the funnel towards purchase, or, you know, download of a white paper, or check in for an event, or whatever your conversion metric happens to be.
Indeed, schedule an appointment, or right, exactly. It's it's really just marketers are now really limited by their imagination here. The you know, what those specific use cases that can drive conversion can now just be done right in the inbox itself.
Yeah. Did you want to take this question that just came in?
I did.
The last one?
The service-based businesses, hotels or restaurants utilize inbox commerce. We just hit on it for a second. Yeah, you wanted.
Yeah, I think there's some great use cases there, right? As a restaurant, it's confirm or book a reservation. Maybe it's a takeout option. You could, one of the examples I've seen is order a pizza. So you fill out all the different toppings that you want and the size. You could order pizza, you could order your meal, book, confirm reservations, with a live schedule feed. For airlines, it could be a similar, confirm your trip, book your ticket, download your QR code, pick your seats. Like Nick said, it kind of becomes how much effort you put into developing your API calls and your interactions. This guy really does become the limit for a lot of these things. And in theory, in hotels, you could do, for someone who is a member of a loyalty program that has credit card on file, it could be, remote check-in direct from email. So there really is, the sky is the limit. Anything you could do, almost anything you could do in your mobile app, you could probably do in your email with a little imagination and a little effort.
Yep. And a great tie-in to offline too, right? Find, you mentioned schedule an appointment, make a reservation, find your closest store, find your nearest restaurant, and delivering those data, live in real time.
So just like a real life example, something that you have to do regularly, you need to book an oil change for your car. Your car dealership could send you a calendar that says, you're due for an oil change, or we think you're due for an oil change based on time. Pick a date, pick a time, pick a drop-off location, appointment made. Then the next day or the day before, they could send you an email that says, confirm you're coming, right? Because they'll obviously be busy. Most businesses are busy right now. Confirm you're coming. Could be any appointment. Confirm you're coming through email, single click, boom, you've now confirmed you're going to show up for your appointment. 2 examples right there for AMP emails.
Yeah, no, right. And again, driving meaningful lifts in overall metrics. Here's one, 5x lift, as opposed to having these messages click through to a landing page where, as Matt said, we see significant drop off. Right here, it's happening in the message itself, real-time tracking showing up in the message itself. Across the entire life cycle, or across the customer life cycle. We mentioned welcome message, probably a really great place to start. Highly engaged message streams where you're getting people when they're most likely to open, but asking them for some zero-party data right up front. What can they do? What incremental data do you need as a marketer to help personalize them, their experience moving forward?
That example just literally happened in my household. So my wife had registered for something and they only asked for her email address because the least amount of friction. They then sent her an email that said, come back to our preference center and update all this other information for us, right? That could have all been done through AMP, right?
Yep.
Click here to update your preference. Give us your first name, last name, date of birth if you need it. Potentially, postal address for shipping, things like that, to basically fill out your personal profile with that organization.
Yeah, can make a big impact on the overall program. Product search for people with who are trying to drive product discovery, just being able to engage with that product catalog from the message itself, search and engage with the catalog, 10x times engagements by making that happen. Gamified offers, we know gamification works. It often works much better if there's no friction in the process, if it's easy, quick, and fun, which I think a lot of it is fun seeing something completely different and interactive in the inbox.
Yeah. And how many times, Nick, have you had a conversation with somebody that's like, I did a horizontal scroll email instead of a vertical scroll email, and I had a huge engagement because people talked about it, and it's something different, and it's something that changes the consumer experience. You could easily do that with an AMP as well.
Yep. Yeah. And I would argue it's more important now than ever before, when the inbox is more congested than it ever has been before. And we're battling as marketers for less consumer attention. Being extraordinary, doing something different often is the kind of secret sauce to driving some of these just huge lifts in overall performance.
Yeah. And every single touch point you see here is an opportunity for something within AMP.
Yep, indeed. Let's take a look at it in action. A few use cases, specifically product carousels.
Yeah,
Oftentimes,
product
yep.
carousel.
Incremental engagement with the product catalog, ability to kind of discover and find things. I believe, and we see big lifts in ultimate clicks there. And it's an area where I think a lot of people started back in the day because it was, it's been something people have been trying to do for a long time. And then this was one way of doing it. But interestingly, I think we have, it's one way, it's one use case, but I think there's some other cool ones too. A big one is cart recovery and abandoned triggers, where many of us are sending them, but many of us can make them much more engaging. The ability to engage with the cart itself from the message, as opposed to, hey, you forgot this. It's, hey, you can engage with the cart now. Big difference, and a big lift in downstream metrics. 80% lift in purchases based on some of this. Zero-party data collection might be my favorite use case for interactive for inbox commerce, at least for many marketers who just want to kind of kick off with some data collection. We see it's hard. Smart marketers are always asking for incremental data. Zero-party data is extraordinarily valuable if people are willingly sharing their data for the purposes of personalization, which, to be clear, that's zero-party data. It's a Forrester term. Data willingly shared for the purposes of personalization. Marketers, oftentimes, as marketers, we operate based on inferred data and observed data, and sometimes we can get creepy about it. And users think we're following them around, and in many cases we are. But if we just ask them, what's your preferred style here? Which wardrobe would you like to emulate here? People, A, appreciate it. B, ongoing personalization is better as a result of it. But it's hard to generate, and making it easy to generate is the key. And we see it every day.
And this is two different ways of doing it, right? There's examples here. Both of these are sort of almost gamification, almost survey, as well as a way to collect some very basic ideas as to who the individual you're engaging with is.
Yep. Yeah, it's good stuff. I think we have a slide talking about our media post interactive campaign of the year, but we'll slow roll that one. But surveys, feedback surveys, ratings and reviews, feedback, critical to us as e-commerce, as merchandisers and marketers. We often work very hard on campaigns to drive incremental ratings and reviews. We need to get these customer learnings to drive our programs forward, but it's hard. It's hard because customers have a lot to do, and if we can make it easy for them to engage with us in this kind of two-way communication in the inbox itself, which is a paradigm shift, we can see big lifts in responses, which just help us big time downstream.
Yeah, and people have been doing this, how did you like the email? How did you like your offer for a long time? And it's been click and it takes you to a web page. It might just say something like, thanks for submitting, right? Mm-hmm. Not a great user experience. Whereas something like this, it's click, feedback immediate, don't leave the page, maybe even, I liked it, thank you. I didn't like it, feedback box, what didn't you like about it, right? You can collect different types of feedback based on different actions within the message.
It's yep, totally. A few other use cases here. We mentioned appointment bookings, a great one, tying together offline, online. A lot of people across verticals leveraging appointments, oil changes, I think is the one you mentioned there. And then chatbots, the ability to engage with customer service agents or support agents, whoever, in the message itself. Yep. Enabling real two-way communication in the message. It's a game changer.
Even AI chat assist bots, right, are all possible there, depending on the number of people that are responding.
Indeed, and as we, as marketers, are investing in some of these advancements, getting them in front of as many of our users is critically important. Email is the workhorse of driving many of these communications, but again, we've been saddled with that drop off, that friction of going through to the landing page. We now have a tool to just bring it directly into our messaging. It makes a lot of things makes a lot of things possible here. A lot of Netcore customers are realizing big results benefits as a result. Carrot Lane, a customer, big lift in engagement. This was the campaign that won best use of interactive emails for Media Post EIS 2022 awards. I was honored to represent Netcore on stage in New York City. But again, nothing mind-blowing here in terms of use case, just asking for some incremental data as part of a campaign, but asking for those data in the message itself, not to Matt's point, not driving them away from the message, in the message flow, realizing a huge incremental lift in their goals. And again, it's not mind-blowing, but it is mind-blowing, and the impact that we can make as a result, and honored to have won that award. Matt, talk us through a little bit. Yeah.
So I think there's as we work through onboarding accounts that are interested in AMP, or existing clients that are interested in AMP, there's a few things. So first off is coming up with the use cases, building out some draft templates, trying them out, making sure that they work. So basically, as we discussed earlier, you need to get that functional AMP message to make sure that you're building the messages correctly. Then there's a process working with Google to go out, and working with Yahoo to go out and basically get your email address. And this is the piece, right? It's a static email address that you need to configure in order to do AMP campaigns. So if you have a whole bunch of different email types that you're sending, and you're using different display email. So this is the friendly from message, right? So it's not the return path address, it's the friendly from address. They're going to look for that to be static when it comes to AMP. So you could have non-AMP campaigns sending from whichever from address you want, but then AMP campaigns coming from a static email address. So you take that, there's a submission process, there's some tests that need to be sent for evaluation. That can happen right at the very beginning. Then there is, like anything, there's an IP warm-up process that needs to happen. That's usually you're sending very low volumes and gradually growing email volumes over a period of time. Depending what your volume you're looking at, that could be anywhere from a couple of weeks to 45 days for warm-up. Then you get into the fun part. So once you get the approval, once you get the IPs warmed up, then you can get into that iterate test type of messaging with AMP and get ready to go live. So your customers are then going to start experiencing AMP message when they're using the web app, the mobile app for for Yahoo and Google, and really start to see those campaigns and the different sort of results that you're going to get from that messaging. Just this was one of the questions that came in earlier. We didn't answer it right away, but we're going to answer it now. So our normal process working with accounts across our client services team, our onboarding team, our deliverability team falls into a few buckets. Usually runs on average about 5 weeks start to finish. The AMP approval piece does take a bit of time, because there is review being done, and if there are questions, if there are issues with the templates, if the fallback content's not good, there might be multiple iterations of those messages sent for approval. And that's why getting those test cases and getting those test content pieces properly set up in that first week or two is important, because if you want to hit that 5-week deadline, you need to give a couple of weeks usually approval time for the Gmail team and for like the Yahoo team to then review that content, make sure that it's secure. They were also looking to make sure that these aren't phishing messages that are being sent, or messages that would violate their terms of service, etc. So there is a whole bunch of things that they do. It's a bit of a black box, unfortunately, what their internal process is. But working through that test case, you only need to send them one to get approved. So you just need that simple test case up front. Then once you get approved, you can continue to iterate as long as you're using that same from address over and over again. So the only time this changes really, the rest of this, is if you're an existing client, you likely don't need to do IP warm up. If you're a new customer, there's going to be an IP warm up process, and we can do that in a couple different ways. Sending static HTML content like your normal campaigns to grow that volume to get ready for AMP, and as soon as AMP is approved, switch over to AMP messaging. We can start with Yahoo early because Yahoo has approved Netcore as a partner for AMP messaging, so the approval processes are significantly shorter than working with the Google team. And we can start to see the AMP campaigns virtually from day one, as long as those templates are properly set up and the use cases make sense there. So the timeline does vary a little bit based on the mailbox provider you're sending to and the test cases you're implementing. But this is very typical when working with existing and or new inbox commerce customers.
Got it. Like, it makes sense. And as I alluded to a moment ago, at Netcore, we've sent, over 2 billion inbox commerce enabled messages across a bunch of stages in the customer life cycle with a bunch of different use cases, and do now have a pretty well-defined maturity curve to kind of get D2C and e-commerce brands up and running quickly and efficiently. And we start with some email triggers, key triggers, some key post-purchase emails, re-engagement triggers, as well as broadcast messages, oftentimes in concert to help warm those IPs and get the engagement going. We don't generally boil the ocean. We pick and choose key use cases here to implement quickly, efficiently, prove value, and then build upon them. But we do have a phased approach, designed to show value in the near term.
Nick, there's a couple questions here as well that we have that there's a little similar, so I'm going to try to answer them, maybe 2 of the 3 of them. So the first one is, can AMP emails be designed differently from mobile and desktop screens? So they follow basically the same principle as HTML messages. So absolutely, you can target the screen size and how you want those messages to look. So there's, the functionality of design doesn't really change when it comes to AMP. So you're still looking at responsive design email, both for mobile and desktop clients. And then the fallback content. So yes, the fallback content needs to be subjectively similar to the AMP content where it makes sense. So you may not be able to do carousel in the HTML part, but you should be able to display at least a similar product or a similar display of said products, which then clicks out to the website. Or if it's an appointment booking, it's click here to schedule your appointment. If it's fill out a survey, it's click here to go visit the survey form. Do you have to be substantially similar? Clearly, they can't be exactly similar. So that is also something to look at when you're trying to choose the templates that you want to maybe upgrade to AMP. Is what's a well-performing HTML template that you can make more interactive that you're already sending. So that's sort of the answer those two questions. As for examples of cart abandonment trigger, that's kind of what we're showing here. And I think this is probably a great time in regards to the, how did you like the product? Give it a rating, give it a review. And then from the point of view of delivery tracking, all of those types of things can be done from AMP. There's certainly great use cases. You could tie that into any of the applications. So STO is one, real-time engagement is another. Even just a standard scheduled delivery of after 24 hours of something being in the cart, trigger this. So, those types of campaign metrics or campaign features are really customizable and work with your existing flows, or could be built brand new flows specifically for AMP messaging.
Yeah. And I would double down on that. Yes, the triggers are a great place to implement them because you get a lot of response on many of those triggers, and by maximizing the impact of that, we can really tip the needle. Maria, we will certainly be sharing a link to the recording to this as well as to all the other master classes for sure. We got another question here. I did allude to the fact that we at Netcore have sent over 2 billion messages. I think we have over 150 global brands using it now. Tons of use cases developed, and I think getting to the question, are there any upcoming features or developments in inbox commerce that businesses should be excited about? I think there are a bunch of interesting ones, and they're not only around AMP for email. I think inbox commerce and in-channel conversion, there's a lot happening there. We talk about it in WhatsApp, and I don't know if you want to maybe talk about schema or some other stuff.
I think like Nick was saying, there's a lot of opportunity. AMP is maybe that first step. We're looking at future development around things like schema. So you may not recognize the term schema. You may recognize it more as so Google annotations is letters. Looking at it, you can do a lot of schema related things that look like AMP even. So you could do product tracking, live product tracking with schema. You could do some interactive, light interactive things. So there's nothing that would hold you back from doing an AMP part with an HTML fallback, and within that HTML fallback, you implement schema. So there are a whole bunch of pieces that can work together. And when people ask me, like, what's the future of email, right? Like AMP is a stepping stone. Schema is a stepping stone, moving into more highly interactive, more engaging emails. And as we continue to see adoption and growth of these, we hope that more mailbox providers will also see the benefit. Tie that into developments like BIMI, DMARC version 2, whether we're going to see a new version of DKIM come out in the future, and sort of whatever is on that horizon for people looking at building engagement, whether it's integration with the product recommendation engines, like the Unbox solution that has product recommendations, search recommendation, integrating that directly into email to WhatsApp, WhatsApp to email. Like all of these things are that next generation inbox commerce that reduce frequency or reduce friction for customers, and increase their ability to engage and participate within your brand's email program. And I think a lot of people think, oh, all of these things, because it's called inbox commerce, are for retailers. Inbox commerce works just as well for a B2B company that says, I want you to download a white paper. I want you to book a demo. So it's really looking at that engagement piece, and tying it back into what can I do with my email? And your imagination at some point is going to become the limitation.
Yep, it's a fact. It's the future is here now. Matt, thank you so much for joining us this week. Sincerely